Good morning, everybody. What a fabulous group of people we are this morning. Thank you, Evie, who's hiding at the back, for that beautiful welcome to country. It's always such an honour to hear you talk. I think I've heard you in many, many places around this beautiful city and beyond, and every time I learn something from you, you are so fundamental to the movement to end violence against women here in New South Wales, and we are so lucky to have you as part of DV New South Wales, the broader sector, and in our communities as well. Thank you. Excuse me, I'm a little bit croaky this morning. I'm not sick, I promise, because I wouldn't be here if I was. I wouldn't be irresponsible and spreading germs. I just have two small children who are constantly dealing with some kind of bug, and I think one of them snotted all over me last night, so my apologies if I get a bit croaky. We have a spectacular panel for you this morning. Today's a day off for me, but when I was invited to come and spend some time with these three women, how could I say no? They are all leaders within their own fields. They work, not just a day job, as we all know, working in this space. If you are a First Nations woman, you don't get to go home and, turn off the phone and switch off and stop thinking about and working in this space. And they're also, I hope this is not rude, I'm going to say you're the next generation coming through as well. We were talking a little bit earlier this morning about the fact that this is an issue that has been raised by Aboriginal women for years and years and years and years and years in New South Wales. Before these excellent women, we had Christine Robinson, Rachel, who is, I think, on a panel later on today, Rachel Martin from Warringabia. We've had Dixie Link Gordon and many others raising this in community forums, raising it in homelessness settings, raising it with police, in meetings with police for a long time, ever since New South Wales Police really started to become very proactive in terms of policing around domestic violence in New South Wales. So it's a shame that we're still having to have this conversation, but we know that it is as urgent as ever. And thank you to police for coming, because it's not easy stuff to hear. We appreciate you coming and being in that partnership that Yvonne was talking about. We're never going to fix this problem with the policing system. We're never going to fix this problem with the legal system. Our services are always going to be stretched, and we will never deal with this problem in isolation. So it's really only when we come together and have these sorts of conversations that we can make some incremental steps further. So the other thing I just wanted to add before I ask these women to introduce themselves is there is a Senate inquiry going on at the moment. Very, very powerful inquiry hearing for the first time for some families are being given the opportunity to tell their stories about how the system has failed them. The very excellent Dorinda Cox from Western Australia, who is an ex-copper. And so she knows how the systems work, and she knows how the systems fail as well, is one of the people who is sitting on that inquiry, the Senate inquiry into missing and murdered Aboriginal women. This is something that every Australian needs to know about. Those of us who have been working around in this space for a while know what happens when trust is lost in the police and the legal systems and the institutions. And they know that the results of this often end up with the deaths of Aboriginal women, but also the disconnection and the dislocation for children and young people, the removal of kids into the child protection system, the disintegration of families, a complete lack of trust in any institution. And so these conversations that we're having today are fundamental to starting to rebuild some of that trust, starting to really honestly, a bit of truth-telling about how the system fails Aboriginal women particularly. I'm not going to talk too much more now because, as I said, we have 3 excellent women today who are going to talk to you and share their perspectives. I'm just going to introduce them and then I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves. So we have, most people would know, Regan Mitchell from Weave. Regan is the Domestic Violence Program Manager and Prevention Specialist at Weave up in Redfern. We have Gail, Gail and I haven't seen each other for a little while, but it's great to be here with you today, Gail, from Women's Legal Service. Gail's the Senior Community Access Officer at the First Nation Women's Legal Program, and Evie Rankmore from SAHSSI, Crisis Case Manager at Illawarra Services down in that beautiful part of the country, and it's busy, right? It's busy, Evie. So I'm going to, before I kind of ask a few questions of you and give you some time to speak, Regan, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you?
Yeah, thanks, Moo. So yeah, my name's Regan Mitchell. I'm a proud Wiradjuri Noongar woman, also born and raised in Cowra. I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal Lambron today and pay my respects to elders past and present and any other Aboriginal people here or online and everyone else. Yeah, do you want me to talk or go? Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Evie. I'm a proud Nudgee woman, super happy and blessed to be living and working on Dharawal country. I work for SAHSSI, which stands for Supported Accommodation Homelessness Services, Shellhaven, Illawarra. I've worked with SAHSSI for almost 9 years. Previous to that, in out-of-home care and family preservation and family support.
Morning, everyone. I'd also like to just say thank you to Yvonne for the welcome to country. It was lovely. My name's Gail Thorne and I'm a proud Wiradjuri and Kamilaroi woman. So my Wiradjuri family is my mother's family from Wellington. The Kamilaroi is my father's side of the country and that's from Walgett. I live out on Ganagara country now and I work on the land of the Barramadigal people in Lidcombe, and I'm the Senior First Nations Community Access Officer with Women's Legal Service, New South Wales.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to start with you, Regan, and this is a big question. It's lucky we've got some time to have a proper yarn this morning. I'm so pleased that we've been given some time to have a proper chat. Regan, why do you think perpetrators are reporting women, and why do you think it's increasing?
I think that's a really easy one because it's easy for perpetrators. It's easy. It's the very quick and easy way to hurt in the most powerful way your ex-partner, especially when we're talking about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, because it's the greatest form of abuse. Because if you go to the police, especially when we know that our women don't come forward very often, and it's much more harder for us to come forward for lots of reasons that I hope we're aware of. But when a perpetrator reports an Aboriginal woman, you've then got to deal with a lot of other extra stuff and your child protection gets involved, and I kind of talk about that later on. And all the other layers that Aboriginal women have to face with not being believed is the bottom line. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women don't get believed like other women don't get believed, get believed.
Did anybody else want to comment on that? Why do you think, I don't know, Evie, if you're seeing more reporting or misidentification with the women who are coming through refuge?
Yeah, it's tit for tat most of the time. A woman takes out an AVO, so he takes an AVO out on her, and Regan's absolutely right. Most of the Aboriginal women I work with aren't believed, and it's up to us as case managers to try and convince people that yes, this did happen and this is what's happening and it's still going on. But absolutely, it is a bit tit for tat.
Yeah, constant advocacy, isn't it, Gail?
Yeah, and I think in a lot of cases perpetrators are getting smarter, so they do know that First Nations people don't trust the police, so they use that as a way of power and control as well. If you don't do what I say, then I'm going to ring the coppers, because they know that First Nations women they don't trust the police. So I think that's another reason as well. They're getting smarter. Yeah,
more creative and easy way. And you know that if you speak to any Aboriginal woman and ask them, would they rather get punched in the face or get reported to police and DCJ are involved, they will all tell you they'd rather get punched in the face. It's safer.
Yeah, the police will always be the last option, always.
That's pretty, I mean, I think we all know that, but to hear you say it in those words, Regan, that physical violence is a preferred option to interacting with police is, it's pretty sad, right? That's where we are. Again, I might kind of throw this open to all of you, but Regan, to start with, what are some of the solutions for community, for Aboriginal communities around misidentification? And maybe all of you can talk a bit to when it does happen, how can it be reversed?
Yeah, it's a good question, because the solutions don't lie with us, because it's not our issue to be fixed. So the solutions need to come from the non-Aboriginal communities, from policies, the social structures. It's a racism thing. The processes, all those things are stacked up. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women will fail. It's just the truth. It is stacked up that we can't succeed under those regimes and systems. And sorry, the second, how it can be reversed. When it actually has already happened, I have personally fought tooth and nail to reverse it, and I've had no success. That's with going through the proper procedures, involving commanders, my CEO meetings, for months and months, and I haven't had an experience where it's been reversed before. So that to me is really concerning.
Gail, I wonder if you've had any of those.
I have not seen it ever be reversed. I mostly see it there where victims are like, I just can't deal with this, doesn't matter what I do, nothing's going to change, and they'll just accept the AVA, or they'll do a crossover AVA, but I have not seen it be reversed at all. No.
And then, of course, once you get into that part of the system, then you're going to court, and
and then down the legal road and DCJ and whatever else comes apart from it. But no, I've not seen it be reversed. And Regan's right. Like, it's not our job to fix it. We can't fix everything. It needs to be it needs to fall back onto those people, onto the police, onto the legal system. It needs to change. Nothing is going to change unless you step up. We can't be the one to come to yous all the time. Yous are the ones who need to come to us. The police need to get involved with the community. They need to know who the community members are.
Evie, you work probably most of the time with women who have fled violence in a crisis and are in refuge. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like for Aboriginal women who are, leaving that immediate crisis, and what ongoing case management looks like, and some of the other barriers?
Yeah. Most recently I worked with a young woman, this is in December last year. She'd been misidentified as the aggressor, pregnant, violent assault. Police showed up, she fought back, threatened to kill him, and then instead of taking her to the hospital to be treated, they tried to get her sectioned. And since then, she was homeless, she came to us. Fortunately, we got her some housing, we got supports in place, baby came early, then docs got involved, and they're still involved. And there's me as her case manager trying to convince people that she's not a violent person, she's just been through hell and back. So that's kind of what we're dealing with, having to convince people in our job that, these women deserve every right, respect, dignity, everything. So yeah, the flow-on effect, and it follows them. And like even in my personal life with my family and friends, it follows you forever. And sometimes you can't shake it at all. So that's what's disappointing, is having to convince people that these women have been violently assaulted and disrespected.
Yeah, we need, in my experience, I feel like even as a worker working in a legal system, we're not trusted either. So you need to trust what we say. If we're saying we're working with a woman, we know that woman, we've met with her 100 times. We go to meetings, we're telling them she's a victim, and we're not believed. So how is the victim supposed to feel? If we can't even get our voice heard, how is she going to get her voice heard? I've been to meetings with DCJ, not allowed to say nothing. Come in and sit down, but don't say nothing. What's the point of that? She's not going to get in here and speak up for herself. You guys need to trust us. We know our women, we know our communities.
Oh, and also get comfortable with being uncomfortable when we do arc up and we are aggressive and angry and upset. Because we were just talking about it earlier, how often we feel like we have to minimise and be stoic and staunch and just avoid, but be comfortable in dealing with women who are just so distressed. That would be my advice.
Regan, I'm going to pass this over to you because we're one microphone down. I know there's some things that you'd like to say. I think
stuff, yeah. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to DV New South Wales for initiating this day and dedicating a day to perpetrator misidentification. But this is not a new phenomenon. This is, like Delia said, this is age old, and it's been happening since men have been abusing women. And now we've just got a term for it that I think we're all able to identify with it more easily, but it's getting worse. And in my role at the Weave Women and Children's Centre, I've been working in a mainstream organisation in a mainstream position for over 8 years on the front line with domestic violence, from start to finish, intensive casework. And I work with all women from all different backgrounds, but in terms of perpetrator misidentification, the cases that stand out are always the Aboriginal and other First Nations women with a non-Aboriginal perpetrator. And I want to come back to that in a minute, but I wanted to share an example first of a case that I was involved with, that I was personally involved with, and I'm going to have to shorten it, of course, because of time, but there's no missing information here around what matters. So this woman actually presented to a colleague of mine at another site, not the site I work in, and she wasn't getting support for DV. She turned up after being in a cell for 10 hours, and the day before, she was going to drop off her 4-year-old to her ex-partner for his visit, and she'd noticed that he was clearly drug affected, and so was his partner. So she said, I'm not leaving my son here. And so he started arguing, and he grabbed her around the throat and pinned her up against the wall. And with her spare hand, she was like doing that to try and get him off, and she scraped his nose. And she's left the house with her 4-year-old, and she has another 2-year-old, and she had gone to bed that night, went to sleep. Now, this woman had been experiencing violence from this man for years. She'd never reported him. She wasn't known to the police, and it's also important to know that she didn't have any criminal record at all. So at 3:30 a.m, she was woken up to the buzzer, the doorbell ringing, and it was the police. The police had come to arrest her at 3:30 a.m. She had to wake up her neighbours and her babies to leave her babies with her neighbours that night. So she's gone off with them, and she's sat in a cell for 10 hours while they waited for the other arresting police station to get to her, the officers to get to that station. In that time, she disclosed to them what had happened, and she had shown them her bruises. They had taken photos of her bruises around her neck, but still she left the station with a charge of assault occasioning actual bodily harm. She turned up to my colleague, the caseworker, and told her, and they've called me, and that's kind of what I was talking about before. We went back to the police station, explained the situation, 9 months of meetings, processes, complaints, and she still has that charge. And in that time, he had taken the child again without any permission and wouldn't return the son, and she went to court, and now she's at court labelled as a violent perpetrator, and it's just not okay. She was that traumatised at one stage throughout that process that she went to hospital with a panic attack so bad. Like, this stuff is traumatic. And I know that I speak for all of us up here as women. Like, we're Aboriginal women, but we care about all women, but it's just different for us. It's different for our women, and I just don't think we can, like Gail's saying, if we don't commit today and every other day with each other in our personal and our professional lives to start having honest conversations about the stuff that goes on for us, and why Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women suffering from violence more than any group of people in this country. Why is that? And if we're serious about progressing for violence against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, we've got to start being honest. And like we've heard today, be uncomfortable with these honest conversations. And, you know, and my hope is today when we hear the other speakers that, as well, that we believe and understand that when we're ever talking or even thinking about this subject, that we align it and connect it with the real impacts of colonisation and racism that's relevant today. It's relevant today and it's recent, and it's relevant tomorrow when every time you are working or talking about Aboriginal women with violence. And I think we will have to commit to understand and really know about that, and it's uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable for us to sit here and say that non-Aboriginal men have been raping and bashing our women since colonisation. And that's the truth. They've been raping and bashing our women casually since colonisation, and a lot of people have known about it, including non-Aboriginal women, and they've turned a blind eye. So Aboriginal women have always had a different experience and have been the least cared about group of women, people in the country. Despite that, you know, and despite all that, and Aboriginal women being, you know, so strong and so unique and so the backbone of our families, and despite the fact that we're being murdered at 12 times the national average, the general society still doesn't care about us in the same way. And I think that we just need to talk about that and own it. And the other important thing that we've talked about is, you know, the way we respond after being assaulted or sexually assaulted or physically assaulted is not, we don't often look the same as non-Aboriginal women. And why is that? Because Aboriginal women, we've got a legacy of having to be silent and shut up. We've had to just get on with business. There's been no other option for us. So that needs to be taken into consideration. And, you know, when I think about the recent NRO's stats say that 41% of people wrongly believe men and women are equally likely to be perpetrators. So if general society think that about all women, how are Aboriginal women going to be believed? So I'd like to ask that we remember that it's different for us. It's different. Perpetrator misidentification and violence against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women is always different for us, because generally speaking, we have never been cared about the same way. And of course, when a woman's falsely reported, we've talked about how, you know, we go straight, child protection gets involved, and it becomes dangerous for our families. And I mean that in the true sense of the word. Our families become in danger. And I wanted to talk about another example that I've got permission to talk about. It's a case I'm involved in right now, and involves an Aboriginal woman who's, while she was pregnant, separated from her partner. She got an AVO on him and his couple of other members of her family. So she's put her hand up and said, I recognise that these people are unsafe for me. I've gone to the police and I've got an AVO. After giving birth, she's too scared, and she's very compliant, and they're visiting baby or allowed. She lets them take baby despite her feelings about this family. But one day the ex-partner comes, and when the baby's newborn, and takes baby without permission. She's gone and rang the police, and they've done welfare checks, but they said, you know, you need to go to court. You need to get family law court involved. In that time, it is a fact, because I've been in the meetings with the medical team, I've been in the meetings with DCJ, Child Protection Unit, social work team and the police, that baby was injured through an adult force injury. The baby's in hospital. Mum has then got alerted, gone to hospital. Has been at the baby's side for a couple of months now. Just recently, as in last week, DCJ removed the baby from the mother. Now, I'm telling you, there's no more something outrageous to this story that I'm conveniently leaving out. It's her first baby. There's no history of violence. There's no history of child abuse. And I've observed this woman in the hospital. What this woman has as a mother, you cannot teach. You can't act. You can't teach what she's got. So this woman now has had her baby removed. And it's stuff that I see firsthand that I wouldn't believe if I wasn't seeing it. It's true. And it is my professional opinion, and I'm very confident on this, that this woman's baby would not have been removed if she was a middle-class woman and a non-Aboriginal perpetrator, and an Aboriginal perpetrator, sorry. There's no way that baby would have been removed. So, you know, my hope is, and you know, with DCJ, and I'm not saying it enough, where women who've come forward and put their hands up, there's no acknowledgement and recognition that they've actually been demonstrating protective parenting. And it's interesting that the perpetrator becomes invisible in the narrative. He just doesn't get talked about, and the spotlight goes on the woman. And it's just not okay. We can, you know, the woman needs to be acknowledged for the protective parenting that she's doing. And just with police, it's my hope too as frontline workers and everyone that's here that's frontline workers and case workers and online that, you know, as experts in this space, we do this every day. So if we present to police and say with our client, this woman's actually the victim and I'll tell you why, and we present and tell you about that, we should be seen as experts, and I'd like to ask for a bit of professional courtesy and a bit of professional respect and trust when we tell you that we actually know what we're talking about. I just think we can't be policing with a style of first in, best dressed reporting. It's not good enough. Surely we're better than this. We've just got to do better than this. I know, like we said, we've got an excellent lineup today, so I guess what I wanted to finish up with is just leaving it with when we are thinking about this subject and talking about any violence, especially perpetrated misidentification with Aboriginal women and Torres Strait Islander women, that we always add and factor in that is different for us. There are additional layers, you know, just to do with it's more complex, and these things we're talking about, racism and impacts of colonisation, always needs to be factored in. Yeah.
That's deadly.
Gail, Evie, how do you go after that?
Just,
I know.
I know.
yes,
Yeah.
or to all that. Yeah, absolutely. I've got nothing more to add to that part. That makes me a bit tired though.
Gail, is there anything you'd like to add? I mean, you're seeing this stuff
Yeah.
day
And
in,
I've
day out
probably got
as well, right?
similar stories to tell. But as I was saying earlier, like as workers, and as Regan was saying, we are experts. We grew up Aboriginal, we grew up Black, we grew up in our communities, so we know it. So when we do go to services and stuff, you know, there's been times where I've attended a police station with an Aboriginal woman who was assaulted, whose kids were removed, gone to the police station, wasn't allowed to go in while she gave a statement. She came out crying and said they didn't believe me. Like, how do we support our women if the police aren't believing them? The police are supposed to be there to protect us. You're there as a worker. I mean, I work for a legal centre. No, sorry, you can't come in. And then she's gone and she's trying, like we try to encourage our women to put your hand up and do the right thing. You know, I've seen women who have gone to DCJ who have had kids removed and said, I'm pregnant, I want to keep this baby, what do I need to do? And still do everything they need to do and still get the children removed. It's like, how do we encourage our women? The system needs to change. You know, like, how are we supposed to support? We do it every day. Like you said, Mert, this has been happening for years. This has been happening since colonisation. And here we are in 2023. I mean, our Women's Legal Service did a report over 10 years ago. We could change the date on that report and use it today. It's still the same. It's not changing. Yeah.
That's right. I wonder for all of you, and I don't want to get too political, but maybe this is the right audience to do it. You know, we do have coercive control legislation coming in. Again, probably all of you have some thoughts about that. You know, more laws, more systems, but hopefully a better understanding of what coercive control looks like. How do you think that that's going to change in terms of the misidentification, where it's shifting away from a response, you know, a one-off response to a pattern of power and control? What would it look like for you as advocates, as workers in this space?
So I'm on the First Nations reference group for coercive control that speaks to the task force, and I worry about it. I am worried because we don't have that, law's not in place yet, and our women are already been misidentified. I feel like there needs to be a lot of education around it, and we haven't got it right now, so yeah, I worry about it. I do, because I feel like it might make things worse for our women. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I'm concerned. I'm glad that there is more education about coercive control, especially in the media and all of that. But for our women, yeah, if any more laws, legislations, all that sort of thing comes into place, yeah, if we're already down here, like, yeah, I'm very concerned.
Yeah, same. I think the concept could be okay, but I worry about perpetrators we talked about are so creative and so smart and clever and able to use it to their advantage. And if, I just think about the training that police would need for this to be possible, to be safe for any woman, let alone Aboriginal women. The training, and then I don't know, I haven't heard about accountability. What happens when it doesn't go right? What happens when we go to police and this isn't the case? Yeah, where's accountability? Who's the external people that the police can be accountable to? I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, 100%. Things need to change and people need to be made accountable. Systems, organisations. The systemic racism within the police, health, education, it has to change. Like, it's still there, and until people are made accountable, I don't think it will. If you're going to get away with something, you're going to keep doing it until you're pulled up. If you're misbehaving at school, you're going to get away with it, and you're getting away with it, you're going to keep doing it until someone says stop. Yeah. So unless there's accountability, I agree, Regan, I don't think it's going to change something, you know what I mean?
Have you seen it done well anywhere where you've got, good child protection docs, caseworkers working with services, listening to what you have to say?
Sometimes when I do, because part of my role is I'll travel around New South Wales, because we're obviously a statewide service, and some communities I go out into, and there will be good examples that they are working with DCJ. DCJ are working with community. They know who their community member leaders are. Same with the police. Like some small towns will say, oh, we've got a good DV police officer, DVLO, and we have a good relationship with the police, and then that person will move, and then it goes backwards. And then that's what they'll say, like, we used to have this good superintendent or commander or whatever, and they're a real good community engagement, and then you go back the next time, they've gone and someone else has come, and they've just gone 10 years back. Yeah, so there are some, you do hear sometimes, feel like we're bagging the police out all the time, but yous are the frontline workers, and yous are the ones that are always there, and, you need to hear this is how we are, we know what happens and stuff, and sometimes you do get some good ones, and then they go on to somewhere else, and then it goes backwards. Yep. Yeah.
Not to brag, but brag away. I feel fortunate that the service I work for, we don't turn anyone away. I'd like to think that when women come into our service and on their referral, it's got all sorts of things written about how terrible they are and how aggressive and abusive they can be, and we'll go, okay, so we'll just give them a go. So I think with our service, we kind of start at that base point of like, we believe you, let's work together, and then build from there. And we do have good relationships with our DVLOs down there and other support services, but not so much with DCJ. Child protection, that is.
Yeah, to your question, Maria, definitely, of course, there are some good examples, and I can think of a DCJ worker now who's amazing, and I trust her and I go to her. But I guess because one wrong experience is one too many, and I see a lot, so I guess we can't, that other stuff gets lost a little bit because of the stakes are so high, and when we're talking about child removal. So yeah, I would say I agree with Evie, more positive experiences with police than, unfortunately, than DCJ. It's rare, yeah.
I wonder, there's a number of people here who are non-Aboriginal workers in non-Aboriginal services who probably would love to hear from you as Aboriginal advocates what we can do better in services where we might have Aboriginal women walking through the door. We may think we're culturally safe, but what are some of the things that we can do to make sure that no matter which door it is that a woman walks through, that she's going to be believed and she's going to be able to feel enough trust to get that support that she needs.
Yeah, with my team are here and we talk about it all the time. So this day is called a perpetrator misidentification thing, and we're for DV New South Wales, but for Aboriginal women it's a race thing. It's a racist thing. That's what it's about, and it underpins everything else. So I spend a lot of time with my team and my organisation talking about intergenerational trauma, the impacts of colonisation and the racism that exists. So and it's not our job to do that. So, my hope would be that non-Aboriginal people commit to doing their own work, do their own research, their own constant looking at themselves, asking themselves their own questions, and every single time understanding and believing it's relevant to your casework. It's relevant to what's happening every single time they connect together. So I think that's what non-Aboriginal people can do, and actually believe it. Not just think they know it, but actually think, oh my God, that was terrible, what happened? No, it's happening now, and apply it now.
Yeah. It's just like you said at the beginning, Moo, about we just don't go home and switch off. We've got aunties ringing us, we've got family ringing us. We go out in community, we do community meetings. There is no off switch for us. So recognising that load, and also in the workspace, creating a culture of safety to be able to talk about difficult things like deaths in custody, missing Indigenous women, murdered women, just having that safe space to talk about it freely. I think that's for me.
Yeah, just listening. First and foremost, listen. Don't look at an Aboriginal, don't look at the colour of the skin, listen to what she's saying. Be culturally respectful I'll give you some examples. I went away, sorry, but this was on the South Coast. So I went to 2 different organisations on the South Coast. This was just probably 2 months ago, I think. Both women, I won't name the services or anything, but they're both services who supported women. The first one I went to, they didn't have any parking, nothing. It was on a main highway. I don't know if you might know who I'm talking about. Anyways, I just thought, I'm just going to pull up in the driveway, let them know who we are, and see if we can come in and have a yarn, tell them about our service, this and that. The lady stood at the door and wouldn't even let me into the organisation. Imagine if I was someone looking for help. Where am I going to park? There's no parking, you've got to park miles away. So you've parked miles away, you've walked down to that service, you ring the doorbell, and the woman's standing there holding the door like this. What can I do? If I can't get through the door, how are women supposed to get through the door? So I go to the other organisation, completely different. These weren't Aboriginal organisations, these were non-Aboriginal organisations. Come in, would you like a coffee? Oh, would you like to speak to this person? How about this? That's what we want to see, that's what women want to see. It's the same with all women, either whether it be Aboriginal or not. Treat us all the same. Just because we've got black skin doesn't mean we can treat us any differently. Yeah.
Thank you, Gail. I don't know how we're going for time, but I wonder would you feel comfortable if there's any questions? Because I reckon, are there any audience questions or comments? I mean, all of you, or most of the people here, I think, are working in this space or are connected to this world. This is not new news for any of you. Any observations? And I'm just seeing some other old friends who I haven't seen for a long time. This is such an important conversation, and if we don't draw a line in the sand now and say we've got big legislation coming through, we've got a Senate inquiry which is hearing and telling the most horrific stories of what the worst case scenario is when Aboriginal women are misidentified. If we can't get it right now, with all of this knowledge and expertise and will in the room and these amazing women, what can we do? So please, questions? There we go, we've got one up the back. And sorry, I didn't even ask about microphones. Thank you.
Oh, hi, my name's Fran. I'm from Relationships Australia. I was just wondering, with those cases you mentioned, particularly the one with the mother whose child was removed, and you said, her mothering was just incredible. Yeah, I just wondered, do you ever seek ministerial intervention? Would you go to the Minister for Child Protection or the Minister for Women or?
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I just had to cut that story short, but absolutely. And it's a shame because it takes us off the actual work, but the amount of energy, stress on workers as well to go do that and involve lawyers and all that stuff. And I've written to people before to get pro bono lawyers, all that stuff, get involved and go to that next part. My CEO, who's got 9 programs and 4 sites, gets involved. Yes, we do, but it's incredibly taxing. We can't not do it, but it's just so unfair and incredibly taxing. And most importantly, the damage is done. I'm thinking about this girl right now, this young woman, I shouldn't call her a girl, young woman right now, and thinking, how is she ever going to recover? The baby might be returned to her if she jumps through all these hoops. It wasn't a permanent removal. But how is she ever going to recover from all these layers of trauma and all these layers of punishment she just keeps getting? So the answer is yes, but yeah.
Just a quick follow-up, and does that make any difference? Like if there's involvement at a ministerial level, are they hearing what you're saying? Are they believing it? Are they getting involved?
We're not to that stage yet, have been before, but in this case, I can tell you that when I involved a lawyer, the lawyer, who is a non-Aboriginal woman, said to me, because we noticed that it ramped up with DCJ, it got worse straight after that, and she said, I feel like, oh my God, this is my fault. Because I've got involved, now they're more angry, it's a power play, and this woman's getting treated worse. That's what she said to me.
Yeah, I sort of feel like once it's in the children's court, it does get worse. It doesn't get better. It's like, I feel like they set the mums up to fail. They don't want the kids to return to mum. You might go to court one day and have a good judge. I mean, the children's court, don't even get me started, but you might go to court one day and have a good judge, and then who you think, oh my God, he's amazing, and then the next week you're back there and oh no, different story. It goes backwards. Mum's got to do this, mum's got to do that. Mum's been doing this, mum's been doing this. Well, how is she supposed to do this? Like, she doesn't drive, or she's not doing this. I've seen DCJ remove a child from a refuge. Like, come on, you're removing a baby from a refuge from a mum who's just had a cesarean, who's told you, I'm trying to get away from this man. But they've made the assumption that she's going to go back, so they've just removed the child. Like, the system just keeps...
Yeah, that's the perfect example of how it just follows you no matter what. No matter what the poor mum will do to fit that narrative of the good mum, and then still not be believed and treated that poorly.
Imagine having your baby removed. You're trying your best to keep it together. You've just left DV. You haven't got a house. You might be living with mum or something. DCJ's taken your baby. You wonder why women are going out getting drunk and on drugs and stuff. You want them to do that. If you're a mum and you're staying home, you're not going to do any of that stuff. But you remove that child and give them no hope. That's what happens. Then the next one comes along and they're automatically, straight away, heightened, like, oh my God, docs are going to take this baby. What do I got to do? It just keeps happening over and over. And even if you do go and say, I want to keep this baby, what do I need to do? Yep, do this, and at the end of the day, the baby still gets removed anyways.
Oh yeah, and then add on the racism they face trying to get adequate healthcare. To address all those other issues, the trauma.
I'll also just add that people online can use the Q&A function on Zoom to ask questions as well.
Hi, I'm Jan from Moving Forward. I've noticed that women now that are being identified as what we used to call primary aggressor, that when they go to court, are you finding with your women that they've got no record, they've got nothing, but they still get hit with a charge instead of like a Section 10, so that, you know, if we could get a Section 10A or B, or whichever one, then they don't get a long-term record after they have their good behaviour bond. But that doesn't seem to be happening with these women that have absolutely no record, and then they're misidentified, they get these charges, and then they can't get a police check for when they want to go and work in aged care or health or childcare. Ladies?
Oh, man, the amount of times I walked out of courts going, what just happened? Like, we've been sitting there listening to lawyers describing for the male perpetrators in there about how hard their lives are and break up, and then they start drinking. They're like, oh, okay, poor little diddums. And then she comes in, and then it's like, what? What just happened? It happens so much. Sorry.
And like that example I spoke about when the woman was, the ex-partner had her around her throat, would be bad enough to get an assault charge, but we nearly fell over when it was an assault occasioning actual bodily harm. Like, mind-blowing. Yes, we agree with what you're all seeing.
Yes.
And I think so we're talking about all the stuff from Aboriginal women, and then add that they're a woman, the misogyny side of things as well for all women. I think that's why it's happening.
Hi, I'm Colette. I'm a case manager at Banksia Women. First of all, thank you for speaking today and for all the work you do. My interpretation of the DV-SAT, when it's used by health or police or courts, it's kind of assessing just the risk, and it puts them into a category, you know, high, extreme, low. Whereas I think for DV organisations and practitioners, we inherently, as you were saying before, Regan, look at strengths of women and the protective factors when they leave, and the courage of going forward, and we also look at the answers on the DV-SAT as less of a risk framework and more of a harm framework, like the effects of being strangled, memory loss, the capacity to parent because of energy going into looking at the perpetrator, and then the impacts on family functioning. I think, yeah, I'm wondering what it could look like if courts and health and police looked at the DV-SAT as more of a harm framework than a risk framework, and if that's possible, if you think that's possible with the criminalisation of coercive control coming in.
Such a good question.
Is the question asking, sorry, couldn't hear you really clearly, if the police used it as a more positive strengths-based, the DV-SAT?
Yeah, and kind of, I think there's so many questions in the DV-SAT, and it's so re-traumatising to go through it.
Yeah.
And the questions just kind of go, okay, you're high risk. Whereas when we look at the DV-SAT as practitioners, we go, okay, you've experienced this is the pattern of the perpetrator.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if it was used differently by police or other institutions, what it could look like.
Yeah, look, I guess I see it as, to me, when I do that questionnaire, I just think, okay, this gives me a good snapshot, and yeah, and as you say, we would be thinking, oh my God, how amazing is this woman? Here you are, been through all this, and here you are putting your hand up and presenting to us and sharing this information because you don't want to be in this position anymore. And also, I think it, you know, I often use it as a way of highlighting. Sometimes it's the first time the woman's ever recognised, oh my God, because no one's asked her those questions, or she's never thought about those questions because it's her norm. So I often see it as a tool where we can say, like, this is what, you know, this is what you've been through, this was happening. And then I often use it as an education session around, you know, especially around the sexual question, because often women don't know how it goes together with domestic violence, because the level of shame to that is worse than physical violence. So I often use that, you know, how common this is, and this is why I'm asking this question, because we know that women experiencing violence often also experience sexual assaults and all that stuff. So, yeah, I think we would deliver it in that way, where we use it as a tool to express, you know, recognition to what she's been through, the fact that she's able to put her hand up and come to is at this stage, and to use that to, I guess, work towards like what life looks like without that. Yeah, I'm sure the police use it as whether it's going to go to the SAMS meeting, or whether I'm going to believe her, or whether it's serious enough for me to do something with this about them. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I do think that some police would maybe use it as that, and we definitely use it in another way, in the right way, I believe.
I'd like police to use it like that, ideally.
But it needs to be consistent. It needs to be across all police stations. You can't just have in one police station taking things very serious and then not another police station. It has to be consistent across all of them, yeah, but absolutely it would be good if they could use that.
Yeah, and I think probably just to add to that, a real understanding of what strengths-based looks like. So coming from that position of believing someone like that's your default, rather than I'm going to use this tool, DVSAT now, you know, it might be something else in a couple of years' time. It's about having a conversation, right? And really understand what's going on for someone. And police are doing a difficult job in difficult circumstances, but there are some police that do it well, because they understand that shame piece that you've all talked about.
Yeah. And that's all it is a conversation, taking the time to listen to them. Don't just look at it as black and white, like he's got a scratch on his face, therefore charge her with assault. She needs an ABO out against her. Have a think about what that's going to do to her and her kids, or, you know, just take the time to have a talk, have a yarn. If you can't make the decision that day, then don't. Go away and make another decision.
I've got two things online. The first one is from Tony Cooper. Just a happy comment. You did me so proud, my sisters. Regs, you are so amazing. You make me so proud as a First Nations woman. I also love the simple concept of treat us with professional courtesy and respect. And we have a red, black and yellow love heart. We then have another question. I think it is or statement that I think we can discuss. I think it's important to speak about stolen generations not as a historical isolated event, but as a narrative that has continued through to the present day. The government policies just change and continue to justify the same outcome, Aboriginal kids being taken away from their family.
Absolutely, it's still happening today. We've got the highest numbers of kids in care.
Yep.
It is, and that conversation needs to happen as well. Like, you're right, Tony's right. Our kids are being taken, like I just said, taking an Aboriginal baby from a refuge. I mean, come on. If you're not safe in a refuge, then where are you safe?
Yeah, and the baby that was removed from the mum I spoke about that was in hospital is actually still in hospital. So they've removed the baby while it's still in hospital, yet she's at the hospital bed every day, all day. It doesn't add up.
And as a worker, like my mother was removed as a child, and I'm still working through intergenerational trauma and trying to not pass it on to my child. And when you're working in that space and you can see it happening right before your eyes, the trauma that we experience just by those actions is a lot for your Aboriginal workers to deal with. So keep that in mind too.
I just wanted to ask, as what you've been describing today, all three of you, is going into what I probably feel at times is really unsafe spaces and advocating for your Aboriginal clients. Do you see any difference when it's a non-Aboriginal worker advocating for an Aboriginal client? Do you find it more challenging because you're going into environments where there isn't a lot of belief and there isn't a lot of assurance, and you're an Aboriginal person in that space trying to get that response?
Yeah, I do. In one case, I couldn't take another woman to that same police station after the complaints process, and even though I tried to speak to the police officer personally first, I couldn't take another woman there because when I did originally, I was treated, my client was treated worse because I was with her. So I had to go back to my organisation and say that someone else is going to have to take the next person because I'm worried that they're going to get a poorer service because I'm with them. And that's not in my head. I was actually like treated poorly where, you know, it's intimidating for us. It takes a toll on us, especially as Aboriginal women, because it's more personal. And, you know, in the police station, it's already intimidating, you know, with guns and boots and police uniform and all that stuff. And it's not fun for us. And it's personally taxing. So yes, absolutely, it is harder. And sometimes we have to maybe step away. I had to in that case for a period of time. But to my team and my non-Aboriginal colleagues, I always try and encourage to build more confidence and to have assertive conversations. And as non-Aboriginal people, and even though it's the police or child protection, you know, we don't work for them, and we need to be able to stand up for our client and deliver it as strong as possible. And despite feeling those feelings, and it's hard to to speak the truth in those situations.
Regan, thank you, because I think as a mainstream organisation, that's really good information for us to have, so that we build systems that protect and respond when you have to put yourself on the line like that. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. Oh yeah, like what you're saying, it's absolutely taxing. We know what it's like to be constantly under the white gaze in our personal and professional lives. So when that happens, but luckily, like if you have a good team with you and you have your big guns so you can pull out when you need to, that helps. But yeah, having to have that difficult conversation with your clients too, like, do you want me to come with you? Because I don't know if I'm going to be helpful. Because that does happen a fair bit too. Yeah.
And myself personally, police make me nervous anyway, even if I'm not with a client. If they're pulling me over, I automatically get nervous. Mm-hmm. But I mean, with services, if I know a service that I didn't feel respected or culturally respected, I wouldn't take a client there. Yeah, obviously with the police, you can't choose the police station. You've got to go to that police station. But yeah, if you're with a client, I think when I'm with a client and I do have to go to a police station, even if we aren't respected, which happens all the time, you do worry about whether you are going to make things worse, like Regan and that was saying. But I feel like I get my strength from them. So when I'm with them, like I would feel more comfortable going with a client because I get strength from her than I would if I was going there for a personal thing. Do you know what I mean? Because Aboriginal people are nervous of the police. You know, like my son's quite dark. I get nervous. I get worried that he's going to get pulled over. He might, next minute they could be arguing with him, then it turns into assault, then resist arrest, and this is what happens. So yeah.
In answer to that question, we rely on our non-Aboriginal colleagues and our non-Aboriginal managers. In my case, like when my CEO comes in and she, speaks really strongly, I know, unfortunately, that it's going to be received differently coming from her. It's going to have more weight. She knows that too, and she'll step up and do that. So if you've got people around you that will do that because they understand it, that's when you usually can make some progress, unfortunately. That's what it takes.
And that's sad. I mean, it's great that you do have that support, but we shouldn't have to send a white person in to do our job. We should get the same respect. I mean, I've turned up at motels with my work and been refused to use a toilet because I don't have the work credit card on me. Would you ask a white person that? Like this, yeah. So I think, I work with amazing women too, and I'm sure all yous are amazing. Yous are all here today, and so you all work in the sector.
Yes, I guess we're talking about, like I said, DV abuse, perpetrator misidentification, but for us, we're talking about racism.
Thank you. Hi. Good morning. Peace be with you to all. Thank you, sisters, for being so honest and open. And I feel like, my name is Maha Abdo from Muslim Women Australia, and being around for a long, long time, it's the same stories being told over and over again. My heart is aching because it's reminded me of the first time we all sat together as sisters and listened to each other. What is going to happen now that is going to get worse? What are we going to do that is different? I think we all have. You are young, you're leading the way. But to hear that you're going through what we all went through 35, 40 years ago, and we're still going through that racism, that issue of having to have someone else advocate on our behalf, we need to change that. So we need to be able to sort of switch that around and think about how we're going to be able to use strength-based approach to strengthen the sector itself. And that can't happen by you alone. So what are we going to do that is innovative, that is different, that is going to shift the system? Because the system is still really treating us not any better, right? So to listen to the stories, to listen to the trauma that all our sisters are going through, whether you're a victim or a service provider, it still hurts. And for me, as an old woman sitting here, listening to this, I feel like I was just saying to her, I've been re-traumatized again. Listening to it again and again feels like I failed. What have I done to walk side by side with my other sisters to make a difference, to shift that? So racism exists. What are we doing about that? It shouldn't be your responsibility alone. We should all collectively work on it together. And hopefully today will open that space where we can have that real trusting conversation that we haven't had the privilege to do that because we've had COVID and other things. But I sincerely appreciate your honest feedback, because to me it says there's so much that needs to be done. And what are we going to do about that? Leaving from here today, we need to have call to action. We can't just keep on talking about the same old, even though it hurts, you know? It hurts you, it hurts all of us. And I stand here before all of you saying, let's lead the way in making a difference. You know, where the next generation is not going to talk about that pain. It's going to talk about the joy of recovering, yeah? That we are transforming. We're not doing transactional interactions. We want to do transformational interactions, heart to heart, shifting the way we do things. Thank you.
Yeah, like you said, we can't do it. It actually needs to become from the rest of Australia. The non-Aboriginal rest of Australia need to do it. Little things like having uncomfortable conversations with each other in your personal life after this as well, like with your non-Aboriginal children when they're little. Oh, I don't want to tell them about that because that's their country. No, tell them the truth. Tell your kids the truth. Tell your friends at your dinner table the truth. If they don't like it, stand up and have those conversations, push through when it's uncomfortable. We can't do it. Even if we wanted to do it, we can't. There's not enough of us to do it. We need everyone else to do it, and it needs to come from the top.
That's exactly right. Thank you, though, for that. That was really lovely. Yeah, you're right, Regan. It does need to start. It needs to start at home, actually. It needs to start in the schools. My father used to say that racism starts at the kitchen table, you know, when you're having dinner or something. So, yeah, you do need to have the conversations and at home in the school with your kids. Yeah.
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. It's really a pleasure to hear from all three of you. I work as a family law and family violence solicitor at Kingswood Legal Centre. And I just wanted to ask, do you have any feedback or observations or comments about the family court and that system when people go for parenting orders or things like that?
What
a nightmare.
So, yeah, like... family court, I think, still has a long way to go, but it is slowly starting to move a little bit forward. We now have the Indigenous list, which I think is really good and culturally appropriate. So the Indigenous list, for those of you who might not know, is a First Nations list that runs every 6 weeks, and it's for First Nations people, and the judge doesn't sit up at the bench. Judge Boyle will come and sit down. Most of it's done online now, but I'm talking pre-COVID, would come and sit down and have a conversation with family, and she'd invite other family members to be part of the proceedings. You know, like say mum might need a bit of a support from her mum, so grandmother would be a part of it, or auntie. I think when I'm with my clients, I go to every single court case with them, and I think that's important too, like to have a cultural support person with them. If it's not within the organisation, when it might be someone in the community who might be able to support that mum going to court and stuff. But yeah, I think there's something happening now in the family court. Is that right, Liz? The legislation is changing, isn't it? There's a bill before Parliament, yeah. So, yeah.
I think he's talked about before about which judge and who you're going to get. I call it Russian roulette because it does, you don't know who you're going to get. And I also find interesting the ICL's independent children lawyers. I find that quite commonly a service from them that's not acceptable. I don't really know about that. I don't know why, but it's a thing that I've noticed in my professional and personal life with anyone that's going through children's court. Yeah, I think there's a lot of lacking of education there, a lot of misogyny for all women, and definitely a lot of uneducated people around racism and colonisation impact.
Oh, and from case managers' perspectives, working in refuges, managing the trauma that these women experience from just their experience of family law court, when children have been forced to go back to their fathers, and we're having to like just try and make it bearable. Having a support person there is probably the only thing I think I would recommend, because it's too much and it's awful. Call it a hellscape. So,
and we're using the word trauma a bit, and it actually is, in the true sense of the word, it's traumatic. And unless you've been through it, I haven't had a child removed, so I'm encountered in that. Unless you've been through that, we cannot imagine. So if we go in always knowing we cannot imagine what this person's going through, and advocate like that.
Do we have more questions, comments? If not, then I'm going to ask you a couple of things. The Metropolitan Police in the UK have been through another investigation 30 years after Stephen Lawrence was killed, a black young man, and they had a huge inquiry in the UK and found that, surprise, surprise, the Metropolitan Police were institutionally racist, and it was the first time that had been talked about in the UK in terms of institutions and systems and structures. And they've just had another similar inquiry which has found that the Metropolitan Police is institutionally racist, misogynistic, homophobic, pretty much all of the things that we're talking about today. How do you think, let me think about how I phrase this question, if the institutions which are the ones that are supposed to protect us, and that's things like Department of Communities and Justice and police and others, are the places that often cause the most pain for the most vulnerable people in our society. What do you think we do about that? Like, what do we have to just start again, or are there models of things in community that we can build on that are about keeping women safe, about keeping children safe in community and connected? I know it's a big question.
So Queensland Police had a commission done a little while ago, and actually have a couple of their recommendations here. But reading it, it would be the same as New South Wales. Like, they talk about they don't get supported. There's, with training. I do think we need to start again, but I don't know, like, it definitely needs, something definitely needs to happen. Like, it's like, you need to start from the top down. So if something's happening in an organisation, the person at the top is responsible for that. So if you can start from the top down, not from the bottom up, I think that would start to make a difference if things are starting to be made accountable. I guarantee you, police within each police station, there'd be police within those police that would know who the racist police are. But they don't say anything. The head people would know. And if they're not saying anything, they're going to keep getting it away with it. It's like I keep saying, like, accountability. So unless things actually start to change, yeah, well, maybe knock it down and rebuild it. Start from scratch.
I don't want to be negative Nancy, but my family was involved in the Royal Commission into deaths in custody. My uncle died in Fremantle prison. What's happened since then? I mean, what was that, 80, 90? I can't talk, I'm getting old. But yeah, unless you like completely wipe the whole slate clean, maybe, don't know.
And the other thing too is if you look around the room, there's a couple of men here, thank you to the men that have come and who are online, but for some reason it's always a women's issue, when it's not a women's issue, it's everybody's issue. So we need men who, just if you're not a perpetrator, that's not enough. We need men to actually step up and talk about it, initiate conversations, challenge masculinity, all those things, and misogyny and sexist attitudes. We need the men to come to the party as well. So yeah, thank you to men who are doing that and who are here today and online.
Just building on that, thank you so much. I think that often, and great we've got some men representing, but I often think we work in an echo chamber and we're also committed, but how do we as a sector, and looking at solutions and trying to be strength-based and break some of the silos, how can we engage people outside of our space? Because I think they also have those attitudes that impact us and the work. And I think with child protection, I know Domestic Violence New South Wales are trying to do some work with the child protection peak at the moment to really look at how child protection workers understand the dynamics of domestic and family violence. And I know I'm turning this into a massive question. I'm feeling really passionate as well, just listening to you. And so, yeah, thank you so much for being so inspiring, and Moo for bringing up some essential points. But how can we break out of this echo chamber, and how can we look at multidisciplinary working as well? So there's two questions there, but I feel like it's always the same people that are really passionate. But frankly, outside of here, do people give a shit about this issue? And I think that's half the problem, that we're not able to engage outside of our sector. And if you're not working in domestic violence, you just don't get it. So how can we, I don't want to put more responsibility on us, but how can we break those silos? How can we get out of this echo chamber? How can we engage beyond ourselves? And I know this is a big, big question, but again, keen to hear thoughts.
Look, I think it's got to come from the government. I don't think we have the ability or the capacity to do it, to reach that. If I think about just something, for example, like COVID and the information sharing, and that was put out from the government because that was their initiative, that's what they focused on, that's what they wanted to do, is something that, you know, they had a goal to reach what they needed to, the information needed to get out. We know they had the capacity to do it. We know they had the skills to do it. We saw it. Unless you were in a coma, you didn't hear about it every day, you know. So we know. So to me, I always think they don't care. I have to like think that. They just don't care. So for me, yeah, if we think about government, it's mostly men, but I think it's going to come from the top. And I don't have that answer, how we can crack that. But it's just way past time where, you know, middle class and non-Aboriginal men in high positions in government need to start making changes.
Yeah, and when we do speak to government, they don't listen anyway. That's how it feels.
I'm going to give one last call for questions, and while you're having a think, I'm going to ask you how you sustain yourself doing this work, because you come here and you talk to this audience, and we're really privileged to have heard what you've shared with us today. But you come with the weight of community and family and generations and everything else when you step up and speak, right? Like, how do you look after yourself when you're having these sorts of conversations and you're doing the work day after day?
I get my support from my family, I suppose. Going home, I'm a grandmother, I've got a little granddaughter, she's what keeps me going, I suppose. But also my sisters, knowing that I'm not here alone. I mean, all you guys are here, so that's what sort of gets me through, my family and my sisters.
For me, that as well. But the ability to go to my boss and say, I'm taking a mental health day, I need to go talk to my elders, and that I can do that, and the flexibility to be able to go out in community as just an Aboriginal person, not just a homelessness worker.
All those things, and me too, having a good workplace as well is so important. You know, I'm lucky enough to never get physically sick, but I always say that if I have a sick day, it's because I'm like emotionally unwell from this stuff. And even in here today, like talking about this, it does something to you. And it's taxing in a different way. So thanks for bringing that up, Moo, because it's real and it's true, but we'll never ever not want to do it because this is what we can't not do it. But it is a thing and it is taxing. But yeah, all those things, and our workplaces to understand that it's different for us.
Is there anything that any of you would like to say before I let you step down?
Just thank you for the opportunity today to DV New South Wales, and thanks for everyone who's here and who's online. Yeah, just thank you for giving me the opportunity to get up and speak about it, I suppose.
So please join me in thanking Gail.